And welcome to the CodeX Cantina, where I am Una.
And I am Crypto. Cloudy crypto? Chance of cloudy crypto?
If you are new to the CodeX Cantina, we cover some of the most important literature that has influenced even today's writers. If you're down for a conversational approach like that, please make sure you hit the subscribe button to join us.
And as always, we start off with publication information. Today we are going to be discussing The Man to Send Rain Clouds by Leslie Marmon Silko. It was published in 1968, and we'll leave a link down in the description below where you can read or listen for free.
Now, the title, The Man to Send Rain Clouds, is a reference to a traditional Pueblo belief that the dead return as rain clouds. And I read in the wiki that Silko grew up on the edge of a Pueblo society, both literally with her family's house at the edge of the Laguna Pueblo reservation, and figuratively, as she was not permitted to participate in various tribal rituals or join any of the Pueblo religious societies.
And I think we see that come out in this story as these blending of these two different types of religious belief systems come together.
Well, you'll notice we don't even really get in the ritual. We're always around the ritual, too. So she kind of preserves perhaps some of that elements that she was not a part of, right?
Looking from the outside, as an outsider, into these rituals and what they possibly could mean.
So for plot, we are going to do the best on perhaps some of these names, but please forgive us that we're not the best at pronouncing them. Leon and his brother-in-law Ken find his grandfather, Teofilo, dead at an arroyo. They pack up his body for the afterlife, perhaps the rain clouds, and that's when they pass the local priest on their way out, Father Paul. Now, Father Paul tells them that their grandfather shouldn't be left alone herding these sheep, and they don't correct him that their grandfather, Teofilo, is dead and in the back of the truck. They return to town, make coffee, and aren't in any type of a rush to attend a Catholic burial ritual. Instead, they have local friends and family over to attend their local burial rites and gravediggers to dig up some land. Now, eventually, Leon goes over to ask Father Paul for some holy water. And when Paul finds out, he's alarmed that he didn't get to perform the last rites right away. While initially resistant to help out, eventually Father Paul agrees to come help and spread holy water across his grandfather, and the grandfather is soon buried. End plot.
Very, very short, but good story and to the point. I think there's some key things that we can pull out of this story that are very subtle about how the blending of cultures takes place. Some history and some religious stuff. It's kind of got a little bit of everything. I enjoyed it.
You know, it's interesting because to me, as an outsider, I'm looking at this story and it's interesting the way it's crafted, because everything about the characters and the way that they look, we get a little bit about what they dress, we get a little bit about the environment, but it's very sparse. It's very clean the way Leslie Marmon Silko decides to choose which information to give to the reader. And it's just the smallest amount of information for it to still be beautiful is the way I would describe how it was to read the story.
Agreed.
But the story is kind of structured around this death ritual, right? We start out with finding the grandfather, and I don't think it's an accident that the first line of dialogue is, "Send us rain clouds, grandfather," which is clearly speaking, I think, to a Native American ritual process or belief system, right?
Yes. I think that what Silko is doing here is kind of taking that idea that Native Americans were polytheistic. They believed in these deities or gods, goddesses that were nature-based, and that they're praying to a rain god of some sort and asking that grandfather spirit will ascend into the afterlife, be able to converse with these rain gods, goddesses, deities, and send the rain back to them.
And it's worth pointing out, too, that a lot of these tribes, they're not monolithic, right? They all have differences in beliefs, and you can research one, but that doesn't mean that you understand the others necessarily. But a lot of them do have in common that there's not really a heaven and hell the way Christianity believes. It's an afterlife, and a lot of times some of the burial rituals will include giving the recently deceased supplies, resources, something to help them on their journey to whatever that next step is in their afterlife. If you believe that they're going to become, one with the clouds and provide rain for, future growth and prosperity, you got to give them the water and things like that to make it to that spot is one way to interpret this, right?
Exactly. I think one way that may help somebody understand this is it's a little bit kind of like Egyptian belief, to where they're going to be getting all these things in their tomb with them to carry them into the afterworld. But I think more of a Native American belief is rooted in the idea that they're going back to Mother Earth, and that they're going to help the Earth, renew itself by, your death giving life to the next generation.
Right. And I think that's kind of, the feather in the hair as a form of prayer and such. And you can do some research. I'll put some links down below. But the idea, too, to me, is we're starting the story structured out with the local native indigenous beliefs, right? We're setting everything up around that. And instantly, we have Father Paul, representing Catholicism, come into the picture. And that brings in kind of the historian aspect of us, right, Crypto? When we talk about this, we know that, Spain kind of claimed a lot of the land in the area at the time. Spain brings with it Catholicism. And we have a conflict of interest, in a sense, with Catholicism and Christianity as a whole kind of expanding and maybe coming into conflict with local beliefs.
Yeah, I love the historical aspect of this story, because you can see how the blending of the past and the blending in this story kind of parallel one another, where when the Native Americans were introduced to European cultures, they were expected to change all of their cultural beliefs and their spiritual beliefs and adopt Christianity, Catholicism, as their primary belief system. And a lot of them didn't do that. They liked aspects of Christianity because it fit with their idea of rebirth and giving back and an afterlife of sorts. So they took what they liked, and that happens exactly in this story, where they were like, well, we're going to still do our traditional thing, but we really like that holy water idea of giving grandfather something to drink in the afterlife. So can we have that and add it to our spiritual beliefs? And that's truly what happened to many of these indigenous belief systems in all around the world as Christianity moved into these places.
And I kind of wonder, too, I don't know if Leslie Silko intended this, but you'll notice, what was the grandfather doing when he died?
So I thought this was really cool, is he's tending the sheep, right?
Mm-hmm. And he dies and the sheep start to scatter. And you'll notice the first thing the Catholic priest does when he enters into the story is, hey guys, why don't you come to church on Sunday?
I'll fix this for you. And that's exactly what happened. Is the Europeans made their way into North, South, Central America. The Native Americans scatter, and they're like, no, come back. You can come to church with us and wear clothes and eat food like us. It's the exact same kind of thing. So it's a pretty cool symbology there of it.
You'll notice that the priest was kind of hesitant to participate in the rituals. First, his rituals is the first thing that comes to his mind, right? First thing that came to Leon's mind was send us rain clouds, grandfather, right? The local beliefs. The first thing that comes to Father Paul's mind is, well, I didn't give him last rites, right? And you and I know more, I think, from a Christianity, Catholicism perspective that, specifically Catholicism, you had to give last rites before the person died, I think, most of the time, in order to kind of purge their sins, because in order for the Catholic view, in order for them to reach salvation and reach heaven, you had to purify them of their sins, which doesn't really coincide with, they don't have heaven and hell in the local indigenous culture. So, each side is kind of instantly drawn to their natural belief system. And then you have this holy water kind of acting as a bridge between the two. And the burial is still a local process. But you'll notice that Father Paul was kind of like hesitant. Like, he's like, well, I don't know if I should be doing this. And it was even slow to kind of open up the jar at the end. Like, you could sense some hesitancy and almost like fear in knowing that he's perverting his own religion and processes by helping out, but not following the Catholic way in this process, I would say.
Yeah, and I think we see this kind of throughout the whole story, right? Where at the beginning, when the boys are preparing grandfather's body for the ritual, and they're putting the paint on there. And I looked up, and the paint kind of represents, the different aspects of the earth, where the blue and the white represent the clouds and the sky, and the white represents the rain. And there's all this, and there's papers written about it, which is really cool. But I think that they're more open and willing this. And I think that that's something that Silko is trying to say, is that we adopted your religion, and you should be able to, meet us kind of halfway. And that's, what the the boys are, asking for their grandfathers, like, hey, we're going to do it our way, but we still want to incorporate yours as well. And I think they're asking for, some respect of their traditional ways, and we'll respect your traditional ways, as we're only going to move forward if we do this together.
That's a very figurative way to approach it, because I wonder, maybe some people like myself, I took it maybe even a little bit more from a character perspective of almost of ignorance of maybe these characters didn't even know where it stopped and started between these two. Like, you and I are classifying these differences of this is system A, this is system B. I wonder if some people could even interpret it as growing up in this culture where both, ways of life are being put onto each generation, that it could even blur the lines together, that we're not even really fully sure where one starts and ends sometimes too.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that with Father Paul, I mean, he's supposed to be a Catholic priest, right? And, pride is one of the deadly sins. And he almost feels like his pride has been hurt, or his church, his belief system has been hurt. And if you kind of look at the way he acts, he should be willing to help these people, because it's going to convince them to become Christians, or at least maybe convince them that they're going to be more receptive to him as, a person and his faith and everything. And he almost seems like he's personally hurt or offended by all of this, and they're not trying to do that. So it could be more just it could just be more of a, Father Paul thing.
Well, I meant more like, why ask even? And then he was hesitant because Father Paul knows where, Catholicism is very strict on where it stops and starts, right? So Father Paul knows, but maybe some people who are brought up in between don't fully distinguish the differences. I guess is kind of where I was going with that one. And I feel like I've seen this in so many different cultures over time too. I think we've talked a little bit about Japan, how they had Shintoism growing up their way of life. And then comes Buddhism, and, Shinto didn't have a good way of handling funerals. And Buddhism's like, well, we've got a process for that. So a lot of Japanese individuals are born Shinto and are buried Buddhist in terms of ritual processes. And now there's like this new wave of being married Christian. So you're born Shinto, you're married Christian, and buried Buddhist is kind of an interesting way of looking at how cultures clash in Japan too, where you can see they kind of take and pick and figure out, not what does this mean to you? What does this mean to your religion? But flipping it where, what does this religion mean to me? And maybe not buying into a whole system so much as using these systems to solve individual puzzles and pieces in your life. I'm not saying that's the right way to do it. I'm just saying I think that's how some people and cultures have come to process and integrate religion into their life, is segmenting off pieces that almost solve problems that are coherent with their own personal world beliefs, not aligning their own personal world beliefs with that religions is what we see sometimes.
So kind of bring that back, you could almost maybe interpret that Silko is, as an outsider, she's trying to say here is that I had to live between these two worlds and blend them together. And if I can do that, then maybe the Lagunta belief system and Catholicism can do the same thing to try to bring these people together over this tragedy, death, and something good is going to come out of it. The rain clouds, the purification, the renewal, the life is going to be brought back to the land, the people, the next generation, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I can see that. I think people, obviously do some research on the Laguna Pueblo individuals and how Catholicism kind of came in. It is a real historical event. It is a real thing that the Catholicism was putting, their churches on the land, trying to convert the people. What does it mean to you guys? Definitely, hear our words, but definitely apply what makes sense to you in turn when it comes to interpreting this story.
We'll leave a link down in the description below for our other Indigenous authors that you can click and enjoy. Now let's move into our very subjective ratings.
So for me, this rating really shouldn't mean anything to you unless you follow this channel, because it's just something that's very specific to me. I thought it was very interesting, and it played more of a role for me thinking about it from an other viewpoint in terms of my Japanese experience and knowledge of that. For me, I grew up very Catholic and didn't have a lot of other influences, so it didn't speak to me a lot personally, but I did appreciate the window aspect of seeing other people's lives in a very beautiful, short prose perspective. I'm going to go with just, in terms of how it resonated, like a 6 out of 10 for me.
Oh, that's pretty solid. I'm right there kind of with you. I'm a little bit higher, I think, because of my personal background in studies of Native American culture and history and everything. I'm going to give it probably a 7-ish, 6.8. I don't know, right around there. It's a solid entry. It's a solid story. It's not too long. But again, yeah, some people aren't going to get much out of this story or might be a little bit confused, and you're going to have to do a little bit of legwork and research on the Laguna tribe to maybe pull some extra out of this if you really, really want to.
All right, guys. Well, I hope you had some fun on our talk today. We enjoy having these literature discussions every Monday and Thursday. Please make sure to hit that subscribe button to join us on the journey. Una out.
Peace.